This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Strictly Limited. In episode 50 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at the Rockin Android-published Gundemonium collection, which featured a flurry of shooting games made by Dojin outfit Platine Dispositif. While the PlayStation 3 versions suffered heavily for their unsavory sound, the Steam versions were vastly improved with an excellent arranged soundtrack by DM Ashura. Of the three, Gundemonium Recollection was middle of the road, better than Hitogata Happa, but slightly behind the superior GundeadliGne. But now an updated version of Recollection is available for the PlayStation 4 and Vita. Gundemoniums is an updated version of Gundemonium Recollection, developed by Platine Dispositif and released in Japan by way of publisher Mediascape in 2017. It would also see a North American release in November 2018, with a physical edition made available by German boutique publisher Strictly Limited Games around the same time. On the whole, this is more or less the same game we've seen before, but with a few new tweaks. And we also sort of skipped over a lot of stuff in the previous review. So how does it fare? Let's take a closer look. Gundemonium seems to be a fairly straightforward game on the surface, but there's a ton of customizability and all kinds of mechanics to the game just under the surface. Even on the outset of the game, it has just a ton of options that let the player take on its 5-stage set in a way that suits their playstyle best. Story mode is the core game, and just in this pre-game menu alone, players can select from 4 different difficulties, 3 different shift or burst styles, and 5 preset characters, Aerith, and the Earl types. There are 4 Earl types available, which gives the player a ton of choice already, but the ability to customize a completely unique one from all of the options between the others, with its very own name for good measure, also exists. Player movement is handled with the D-pad or left analog stick, but both will move the player's character in an identical manner. Analog control does not have variable input when it comes to player speed. The player's main shot is fired with the circle buttons. Aerith's shots are of a fairly rapid speed and will continue so long as the button is held down. Players can also overdrive her shots with the R1 button, which, if used for too long, will overheat her guns and force a cooldown where no shots can be fired at all. Like many bullet hell style games, using the overdrive will also slow Aerith's movements. In the case of the Earl types, there is no overdrive mechanic. The Earl type will simply slow its movement when the R1 button is being held. Given that their weaponry is often more powerful overall though, they can be a lot easier to use than Aerith. However, in both cases, Aerith and the Earl types can be slowed with the L1 button, without penalty of overheat. The cross button is mapped to a mana action that helps in taking out foes more efficiently. These mana actions require energy from a stock located in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. This gauge is typically recharged through collection of green gems. The large ones dropped from fallen enemies will recover mana and add to the player's gem counter, while small triangular ones, which are usually converted from bullets, only add to the counter and do not recover mana. Many mana actions are available between Aerith and the Earl types. Aerith will launch a wheel which will slow time as long as the wheel is in contact with the enemy. Meanwhile, Earl types have time-slowing abilities, heavy lasers, pile drivers, and more. If things get a bit too hectic, a screen-clearing bomber with various effects can be used. All shots will be converted into small blue gems which fill the player's mana gauge very quickly, but come at the cost of score, which we'll look at shortly. Once again, many of these bomber types exist between Aerith and the Earl types. Up to 5 bombers can be stocked at a time, indicated by revolver cylinders. Extra bombers can also be collected through the game by picking up cylinders that enemies drop. Finally, there is the Demonic Shift and Ultra Burst techniques. These abilities gradually drain the player's available mana when activated, unlike the mana actions that use up one segment or a portion of the stock. The Demonic Shift will change all shots on screen to small gems, and enemy fire will be greatly boosted, making the technique very risky. However, more gems will be dropped while Demonic Shift is activated. The Demonic Shift is also activated at the cost of 1 life point and 33% of the mana gauge. Aerith gains boosted rapid fire with no overheat while Demonic Shift is active, but the Earl types do not get a noticeable power boost in their weaponry. It can be cancelled using the square button. The player's gem score is also highly boosted during Demonic Shift. Ultra Burst also increases Aerith's firepower but will freeze progression of the stage, allowing for the player to better deal with larger foes like mid-bosses. The end result is a setup that makes controlling the player's character pretty intuitive by default, though the option exists to customize the controls as the player sees fit. The player's life stock is indicated by hearts in the top left-hand corner of the screen. The player's sprite is pretty big by comparison to its tiny red hitbox, so players can still sneak through a lot of the enemy fire with this in mind. If a player is hit though, they will lose a life point and get flung backwards. All shots on screen are then converted to blue gems and collected to replenish the player's mana for the next attempt. Gundemonium's 5-stage set can be really easy or really hard depending on the game type chosen. The key to the difficulty in Gundemoniums is the dynamic rank system, which is indicated by the phase level in the top right-hand corner of the screen. This phase level will gradually increase the better the player does. There is a phase max of 2 for Novice, 5 for Revised, and no maximum in Unlimited, but Demonic is locked to 11. In most cases, using a bomber will reduce the phase level by 1, making the game a little easier. The phase level will also drop by 1 if the player gets hit. Different difficulties can also help the player in other ways. Novice, for example, has an auto-bomber function. In all cases though, if the player just wants to see the end of the game, they can continue from the last stage played at any time they want, even if the player quits the game entirely. Of course, a 1cc is the goal here. And while the Novice mode is a cakewalk in the park, easy 1-credit clear, Revised is more than challenging enough for intermediate players. Thankfully, the player can earn life extends fairly easily in Gundemoniums, but the maximum life is only 3, unless players can pick up an extra heart. These pickups can increase the player's maximum life to a total of 5. While this does add 1 more life point at pickup, any missing ones still need to be refilled through life extends, which are earned every 1,000,000 points. At maximum life, extends will drop the phase level by 1. The friction system is also helpful in making more efficient progress through the game. Grazing bullets results in an increase in the friction count. The phase level can be reduced by 1 for every 500 friction, along with all shots being converted to small green gems when it happens. This is known as friction break. There are also a number of extra options in a mode called Signet that can be unlocked and enabled to give struggling players a fighting chance at seeing the end of the game. Unlocking and upgrading these features costs the player credits that are earned through normal gameplay. The better the player does, the more they will earn throughout their playthroughs. Faster cooldowns, better mana charge, quicker friction breaks, extra life count beyond 5, and even invincibility can be enabled through various levels here. But scores and replays cannot be recorded. There are some issues to the game though. Most notably, we were a little bothered that the time slowing mechanics weren't maintained at 60 frames per second. When any time manipulation is used, the game ends up just slowing the frame rate down to what feels like 20 frames per second or less. This chunky result makes things less than optimal for gauging and dodging various bullet trajectories, especially later on. We've got some beef with other things too, but we'll get into those later on. So is it fun? Well, in a word, yeah. The mechanics at play are numerous, but also pretty decent, and the customizability of the Earl types gives the player a lot of choice as to how they go about playing the game. 5 stages may not sound like a ton of gameplay on the outset, but there are all kinds of extras that open up, such as extra characters and a mission mode that challenges players to take on objectives at phase 11 difficulty. Other missions open up through various conditions as well. There are a good amount of hidden pickups that can appear under specific conditions throughout the game, which we'll take a look at shortly. In the end, there's plenty of replay to Gundemoniums, and when combined with its decent control, multitude of modes, and fun structure, this is a game that should appeal to a wide range of shooting game fans. One thing we never got into the nitty-gritty with in the Gundemonium collection review we did all that time ago is the scoring. There's a lot of factors that go into scoring in Gundemoniums, which is helpful in getting those all-important extends at every 1,000,000 points. First and foremost, enemy kills are important, not just because of their base score, but also their gems. Collecting gems will award the player with a higher and higher score for each collected. This score builds by 10 points for every large green gem collected in any given stage area. For example, if the player collects 100 green gems in stage 1A, the bonus for the 100th gem is 1,000 points. The 101st gem is 1,010, the 102nd is 1,020, and so forth. In Area 1B, it resets to 0 and needs to be built up again. Small green gems are different though. Numerous amounts of these gems can be triggered through bullet clears and boss destruction, and their score is dependent on phase level. The player will receive 10 points multiplied by the current phase level, so if the player is playing at phase 7, every small green gem is worth 70 points apiece. Using a bomber or getting hit will result in blue gems, but while these gems will still add to the score, each subsequent blue gem will reduce the gem value by 10 as they are collected. So, if a player is getting 1,000 points per large green gem and then collects 50 blue gems, the gem value will drop to 500 apiece and the scores will have to be built up again. Each stage is broken up into several segments which has a bonus score attached to it, so long as the player completes the area within the defined 40-second time limit. Usually, players will need to take out a named enemy sub-boss to complete the phase, and the rest of the enemies are gravy. Several factors make up this bonus, which only shows briefly. The current phase level and enemies shot down make up the basic bonus, which is typically phase times shot down divided by 10 and rounded down to the nearest 10. This varies for bosses though, where bombs remaining times time remaining times phase divided by 10 rounded down to the nearest 10 equals the basic bonus. Throughout each stage section, a hit counter will keep track of how many hits the player is making against enemies. A gauge under this readout will deplete steadily, and if it empties, the combo will end. This also factors into the area bonus. Max hit, gem collection, and friction are tallied and added together to form the magnify value, which tops out at 999 regardless of whether the total exceeds this value. The magnify value is then multiplied with the basic bonus to form the total area bonus. So, for example, if a player has 8 phase, 50 shot down, and 200 max hits, 300 gems, and 50 friction, the bonus will be 176,000 points. There's also a significant boost to the value for boss clears whenever a boss or sub-boss is defeated. Factoring phase and bullet clears starting at 2 times multiplier and mounting to a maximum of 15 times per bullet, a significant bonus will be added to the player's score if the boss can be defeated while a ton of shots are still on screen. Slowing time can definitely result in some great scores, and of course, the huge amount of small green gems can boost the score even higher with a good phase value, and that's not even taking Demonic Shift into account. Other scoring points exist as well. Bullet collisions will award the player 10 points for each landed shot. There's also an onslaught bonus of 1,000 points times the phase level, which is awarded if the player can take out a certain amount of enemies in a given time. The phase will increase by 1 through onslaught though. In terms of pickup bonuses, collecting bombs past the maximum will award the player with a significant 50,000 point boost, and various conditional medallions such as trapezium and aridid also award 50,000 points when collected. The player will even receive scores simply for making it to various points in the game, even if a shot is never fired, and grazing bullets also increases the player's score. Could it be possible to perform a pacifist run? Who can tell, but one thing is for certain, the amount of scoring elements in Gundemoniums makes it one that score chasers will very likely dig. Online leaderboards also exist in Gundemoniums, allowing players to see how they stack up overall or by character, online or locally. This is sure to add even more replay to the package for those looking to take this hefty doujin on. Gundemoniums is definitely a different beast than the recollection version we took a look at 180 episodes ago when it comes to its presentation. While the visuals look very similar, the game is actually presented in true 16:9 Yoko, rather than bordered stretched 4:3 to 16:9 on the PS3 or true 4:3 on PC. The interface has also been completely overhauled with a much cleaner, more modern look than its predecessors. The artistic design has also seen a huge change, though we think the original art from the PC release looks better than the portraits in this version. That doesn't mean that it's bad or anything though. The style is clean and still screams Platiné Dispositif even at a glance. Of course, that also means that now it's super obvious that certain characteristics are enhanced with specific changes in the URL types. You know what I mean. Meanwhile, the backgrounds are nice and sharp with a decent amount of parallax scrolling. Shots are easy to see and enemies are clean and well defined. Still, there are once again some really weird designs here, and some of the animation choices are a bit bizarre. Why are these enemies doing the monkey? Sound-wise, the excellent DM Ashura arranged tracks make a return to replace the more or less awful original soundtrack, something that we absolutely embraced and loved about the Steam version of the Gundemonium collection. There's really no reason to play the game with anything but the arranged tracks, especially since the sound effects themselves leave an awful lot to be desired. Players are going to hear an awful lot of super loud, overdriven, low-quality, cliched doujin effects here. We've heard them in so many places for so long that we just kind of scrunch our noses when we hear them. It's too bad that the sound effects themselves weren't also updated. It could have made the sound in Gundemoniums fantastic all around. There is one effect in particular that irritates us in ways that barely have adjectives to adequately describe. When Aerith's guns overheat, get ready for Service Spell Extreme! That aside, Gundemoniums also has non-invasive story slides between stages and multiple endings for players to enjoy, depending on the character chosen. This definitely enhances replay, especially with so many additional characters to unlock. Rounding out the presentation is a clean, easy-to-navigate menu system and trophy support for players to squeeze even more replay out of this super solid title. But how does Gundemonium stack up? Let's take a look. The controls in Gundemoniums are better than Recollection, but still feel just a bit off. There's lots to take on in Gundemoniums, with a challenge on Revised and higher that is sure to please veterans. At just 5 stages, it seemed as if Gundemonium's length would suffer, but a number of unlockables, special collectibles, a decent amount of extra characters, and online score chasing really makes for a ton of replay. The visuals in Gundemoniums works really well. The interface is much better than Recollection, and super sharp high-res pixel art hits the spot. There are some odd animation choices though. Gundemonium's sound is easily its weakest aspect. While the music is excellent, DM Ashura's remix BGM destroys the ear-bleeding original. The sound effects are overused, poor quality, irritating, badly balanced, and super cliché. As far as Gundemonium's ingenuity goes, the Earl types add a layer of flexibility rarely seen in a shooting game, while the layered extras and hidden characters boost the replay of Gundemoniums by a fair margin. All that, and Gundemoniums is super fun to play. For $15 you can download a copy of Gundemoniums for PlayStation 4 and Vita at the same time. This cross-buy title also has a cross-save feature, allowing players to take their progress from the PlayStation 4 version to the Vita, and vice versa. It should be noted, however, that the physical Strictly Limited release does not include the Vita version, so far as we can tell. I'm glad we revisited this game. There's a lot to it that we really glossed over in episode 50, mostly because we took a look at 2 other games along with it. Gundemoniums is definitely a title worth looking into, thanks to its super deep wealth of content. Now, here's hoping we see GundeadliGne sometime in the future. Gundemoniums gets a 4 out of 5. You can get a copy of Gundemoniums on the PlayStation Network store for about $15, which also comes with the Vita version in tow. Strictly Limited copies are, unfortunately, sold out, but you can still check out what's on tap at strictlylimitedgames.com. Whew, that's another one down. I've been trying like mad to chip away at these releases. Next up, Horizon Shift 81.